listening to India's first podcast for all you athletes. This is Hit the Road. I am Rohan Thakar. And for those who are tuning in for the first time, we are available on Castbox, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, eplog.media website, and JioSaavn and all other major podcasting apps. So, if you did not listen to our previous episode, let me take you back in time where we had a conversation with Chaitanya Velal. Yes, he's an Ironman coach, a 3 times Ironman finisher. He is among the fastest ultra athletes in India, and he recently finished second at the Deccan Cliffhanger. Wow, that was some epic conversation, and I insist you to listen to that. Now, moving on to today's episode, our guest for today needs no introduction. She was among the people who introduced BRM in India. Her company, Inspire India, has been responsible for bringing the concept of ultra racing in India. Races such as Deccan Cliffhanger, Ultra Spice, and Great Himalayan Ultra belong to her. Yes, she's the my bap of ultra racing in the country. She's none other than Divya Tate.
Thank you, Rohan. Thanks for inviting me for this interview. And as usual, I love to talk about cycling and ultra cycling in particular.
That's brilliant. So there was a time when people would say that क्यों 50 किलोमीटर साइकिल से जाना है, and now people are participating races which are 1750 kilometers across the ghats of the country,
Yeah.
breaking all the speed records on a cycle.
Yeah.
ये पागलपन कैसे लाया?
So you're very right in saying that until some years back, people, 50 was too much, 5 kilometer also was too much.
Yes.
And I have been cycling for about 27 years or so.
Right.
Since since 1992, which is as an adult when I started riding bikes for leisure. And until 2008 or 9, there were very few people who cycled for leisure in India. The activity was basically the poor used to cycle, so there was a little sort of an elitist mindset also. And Indians until the 2000s, Indian people had a sort of a problem with breaking a sweat. So, but voluntarily breaking a sweat was a problem. So, the fitness industry, running, cycling, all these outdoor activities have taken up. Really, it's been only a decade since we got enthusiastic about doing it.
True.
So it's been a long, it's been a big leap from 2010 to now. Within these 8-10 years, we've made a huge leap in what all we are ready to do.
Right. So you came back from Bogmalo last week.
Yep.
How was the Ultra Spice race? How was it different from the past?
So the Ultra Spice race this year, this was our 3rd edition. And the number of participants hasn't grown hugely, but everyone that we got at the race was already experienced, willing to challenge themselves. Now, racing 1750 kilometers or even 1000 kilometers, which is the other distance in Ultra Spice, is a huge challenge. So there's only so many people across the country who will be ready to take on that challenge solo. And even as relay team members.
Right.
So we had about 6 participants who were ready to do it solo. And we had 1 relay team in the 1750 category.
Right.
Plus then we had about 4 participants doing 600 and 1000 altogether. So they're all from a background of doing a fair amount of training and a fair amount of racing, randonneering before they actually think about doing the Ultra Spice.
Right.
The race was awesome because, we had racers from around the country, from Chennai, Mangalore, Bombay, Nasik, and of course from Pune. And we all congregated at Bogmalo, and it's a wonderful, cozy. It's a very community binding kind of event because crew members who are crewing. So, as some of your listeners might know, ultra racing of the kind that Inspire India does involves support crew. So each racer comes with maybe on average 6 to 8 crew members who are supporting them throughout the race. So even the crew members are from the cycling community, some are from the running community, and it's great to kind of meet up together at Ultraspice. We had a wonderful event.
It's like a gathering.
It is really, and I'll tell you more about how the community feeling really came together at the end of the race.
Wow, that's brilliant. So speaking about crew, you were at the RAAM a few years back. You were the chief crew, right?
I have actually crewed at ultra races about eight times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, across different races. So Race Across America, and I started crewing in 2012 at Race Across America. After that, 5 consecutive years I was at the RAAM start line crewing, or in some cases in 1 year I crewed and officiated. I crewed for the shorter distance, Race Across the West. Then I went back to the start line and went across as an official across that race.
So Race Across America is a total different animal.
I call it a monster.
Oh, that's right. Let me correct myself. So there is 1,750 kilometers race of Ultraspice, which is among the toughest. Then there is the RAAM. And please tell our listeners, where were you before this interview?
Okay. So Race Across America, which is the 5,000 kilometer endurance race, which goes right across the US, starting from one coastline to the other. And 5,000 kilometers it's a monster. And so I tell racers who are even thinking about it that you have to consider yourself as though you're going into we can call it battle with a monster, and you need to understand that monster. So, and you need to prepare yourself for it. So the preparation path is from, we start of course with the Deccan Cliffhanger being what you could call the first step or the first tappa in this direction. Then you have the Ultraspice race, which is 1,750 kilometers, and then once you've done that, you can think about RAAM.
Yes.
So this year at the Ultraspice race, we had 3 racers who were planning to do RAAM. One of them has had to withdraw because of an accident, that is Sundaram Narayan. But 2 of them, Kabir and Bharat, have done Ultraspice last year as well, winning 2nd and 3rd place. And this year, Kabir and Bharat both were racing each other at Ultraspice. Bharat won the first place, and Kabir came in a few hours later. Bharat incidentally set a new record at the Ultraspice 1750, which was under 96 hours. And the 2 of them are planning to go for Race Across America in a few months. So the 2 of them have gone, and like I said, you have to familiarize yourself with the monster.
Right.
So Kabir and Bharat have crewed at Race Across America in the past years and seen what that monster is a little bit about the monster. Now they're going to race it, and they're going with crews of about 8 to 10 people each, out of whom, except for one, nobody else has seen the Race Across America, the route, have no experience with that. So their crew who will be going with them to RAAM have got a fair amount of crewing experience in India itself, at Deccan Cliffhanger, at the Himalayan Ultra, and at Ultraspice race. What I sort of approached them a couple of weeks back and said is that would they like me to take them through a sort of training for the crew directly with respect to RAAM, how the crew understands what their role is going to be, how to stay safe over there, particularly about driving, traffic rules. The traffic and driving over there is completely different from what we do in India.
True.
So because I've done it so many years, I've written down, my own notes on what we need to keep in mind and things. So we took them through, it was I think a session which lasted about 5 or 6 hours straight. And I think that they were happy to receive it, and also a little overwhelmed by the volume of information that they need to process.
I'm sure it would be a ton.
It was a ton. I didn't even expose them to most of it. I kept some of my documents hidden. I said, this will be too much for you right now.
So speaking about the racing scene in India, you have been a very big stepping stone to get such races in India, like there was nothing in the past. How is it evolving right now?
Just so people, the listeners understand, when we talk about cycling and we talk about racing, there are many different kinds of racing. So,
Yes.
most of my involvement has been with ultra racing,
Right.
ultra distances. So, I also oversee the ODAX community all across India, the ODAX India Randonneurs. I'm the
Right.
national representative of that activity, which is not races, but they're 200-kilometer rides upwards.
Right.
That is 200
They're-
to 1400-kilometer distances. Um, in the ultra racing that I conduct, there are 3 races which Inspire India conducts. That's starting with Deccan Cliffhanger, which is now we finished the 6th edition. And the Deccan Cliffhanger is like a really well-known ultra race across India. We have,
Right.
I know that there are right now cyclists who are already preparing with like 10 months to go. They've already started training in anticipation of Deccan Cliffhanger in November. So if we just look at the progression of the Deccan Cliffhanger,
Yes.
I started this race in 2014 was the
Right.
first one, and that year we held it twice, and we were just happy to have like about 10-12 participants.
Right.
And this year this is the 6th edition, we had to set a cap on how many participants we can take, because that race can't actually take more numbers.
Right.
And we see year by year that people are training for it well in advance, planning for it a year and 2 years in advance. So it's wonderful to know that the activity has grown to such a degree that people can think about doing 640-kilometer races with ease. So many people can do that.
Wow, that's awesome. Just to interrupt her, if you have not heard what Deccan Cliffhanger is or how difficult it is, just go to a second episode with Chaitanya Velal where he perfectly describes how it is and how he managed to finish it quite well in the podium.
Yeah.
Thrice, in fact.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. He's one of the few people who's done it 3 times successfully.
That's
Yeah.
brilliant,
Yeah.
And this year's Ultra Spice, we saw Ila Patil as well in the race, and
Yeah.
she quite well finished. If not RQ, she did finish the Ultra Spice race in the time.
Yeah.
So there was Ila Patil who just finished the race, and there's you who have been directing all these races. So how do you think women can come front, apart from the group rides, in such competitive segments?
So I think it's about base building, basically. So so even something like 1750 kilometers there are very few men or women, there are very few people all across India who would consider doing something like that. So and the reason for that is just that we need a bigger base. So right now when I talk about Deccan Cliffhanger having a large number of participants,
Yes.
that's the base. And then 1750 kilometers. So races like that are literally the pinnacle of performance in cycling. Little before this, I was talking about the different kinds of races.
Yes.
And you have, of course, the fast pro racing community where the distances are much less, but they're much faster.
Yes.
And the kind of training, the kind of people who participate in those races, ultra races and that racing very rarely overlaps. Very few people will be doing both of these. Then, of course, you have mountain bike races and you have, like I described, randonneering events as well. So, these races are the kind of races that create an aspiration. So, there's, and we may see this change and we may see this effect across young girls and women, not right now, but maybe 5 years or maybe even 10 years down the line. So one has to know that one is in this for the long haul. So I cycled as a woman in India. I cycled for 18 years, entirely on my own, completely solo. And I didn't even forget about knowing women who cycled. I didn't even know any men who rode.
That's true.
And then, after the first brevet was conducted in India and I participated in that. In that, I think I was one. There were maybe 2 women out of some 65 or 70 total participants. I became the first woman to qualify for Paris in 2011,
Wow.
and went for this. And I was the first woman, and I think it took 2-3 years before another woman did an SR series in India. So it's a question about being patient, because it took till 2013 for there to be 2-3 other women who were willing, who came out and rode the distances that that are required for the SR series, which is the Super Randonneur series. And between 2013 to now there are countless women doing it. And for every woman who's doing these kind of long distances, there's a whole lot of other women who are just riding to commute, who are riding for leisure, who are riding to, taking their children out for rides and things. And that's the base. And very frankly, that is a very important thing for just women to come out onto the race. It's not about the distance. So somebody like Ila Patil doing 1750 kilometers is inspirational and aspirational for a bunch of people. And the trickle-down effect is right down to the woman who looks at that and says, well, if she can do 1750, maybe I can just do 5. And that's great. That's where it starts. People who are just willing to take that first little step towards getting out and riding.
So speaking about all these races, all the categories of races, there are people who are looking up for more events. And of course, you have been doing it. What tips would you like to give for people who want to create such events?
So events are an essential part of the ecosystem of any sports activity, particularly like cycling. So, and events, I have seen the growth of events from 2010 when the first brevet was conducted to now, and we've got like more than 600 brevets across our country each year, and so many races in every city. I think managing an event or conducting an event for a group or a club to get together and do something like that, it's not very hard. You just come together, and it can be something as simple as a club of a cycling club or a neighborhood club just comes together and says, hey, let's do any kind of an event. It doesn't have to be a race. It could be a tour also. Any format that has some kind of parameters, and you come together and say, let's do it, and then bring it on. And that's how you actually see a lot of events grow together.
Right. Many of cyclothons in the city have grown like that.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant you see that so many people have been participating in the cyclothons which are there in the city. It's like a stepping stone for everyone to get into some serious cycling. Like I was reading about Kabir, where he just got a hybrid to get started to cycling with his friends, and now he's aiming for RAAM.
Yep.
Similarly, there are women as well who look up to such people, and but there should have been some conditions which stop them from going ahead.
So the thing is that even in 2011, when I was the only woman to qualify and the only one to participate in Paris, which is a 1200k ride.
Yes.
It was a bit shocking to me that this was not something that was particular to India. I was one out of 15 people from India. But when I looked at their statistics in 2007 and then 2011, they, like a 1200k event, which has got such a huge history, sees only 6% women. I think that number has is not grown that much. It's still not even at 10%, I think. I haven't checked the last. Maybe we'll find out. This year is PVP year, so let's see what kind of numbers we get from women in that. So 6%. So like when I was standing there, I'm standing in a sea of men, okay? And
totally visualized.
And it doesn't sound, for all the women out there, it doesn't sound as good as like, oh, you're in a sea of men, good for you. No, sorry. I would like to see more women out there. I would like that number to be far, far more balanced. So seeing that kind of a percentage of participation in international events, not just in India, it has been a topic of interest for me to understand why it's so low. And it is low all across the world.
Agreed.
I think that there's a bunch of things that cause women not to take to the roads to cycle as much. One of them is that there's equipment management involved. So when you look at running and you see marathons and things, you see
Yes.
a lot more women running because it's just far more simpler to put on a pair of shoes or not if you're a barefoot runner and just get out there and run. Whereas cycling involves a lot more. It's not about the skills. Any woman can pick up how to maintain a cycle. It's about the amount of time that it takes to have to. It's not just, say, 5 hours of activity a week would require maybe an hour or so of maintenance work to be done on the cycle and your equipment as well. And so it just sort of adds one more barrier. So the second thing that causes women to be more reluctant to get on the road cycling is traffic and having to deal with it. And, so interestingly, the thing is that the percentage of women drivers in, say, India, for example, is ridiculously low. And I have actually counted this to see, is this really true? Your listeners will be shocked to know that the licenses that I issued in this country, only 4% until 2-3 years back were issued to women. That's how bad the scene is. So now women are not just facing traffic, but they're facing like 96 out of 100 people on the road are men behind wheels. So they're dealing with that. And that's another, it's less like if it was 50% women and 50% men, it would be a much friendlier environment for women to get out into. So now you're like, every time you get out on the road, you're in a male environment.
Right.
And it can be a hostile male environment too. So in the sense that with road rage or this or that, and you're trying to navigate your way and you've got somebody yelling at you to, get out of the way or stuff like that. So that's one second thing that plays a role in this, that impacts this. And the third most important thing, and I hope your male listeners, think about this and do something about this. The biggest drawback is that women work far, far more than men. Women have far less leisure time than men. And however you put it, all the men out there who are cycling for so many hours in training may think that like they're doing some very, very sporty thing, but you're doing it in your leisure time. And women don't have access to leisure time. And biggest thing that would help women to get out would be if more men did housework and helped raise the babies and change the diapers. Leave the feeding to the women until they're breastfeeding. But cooking, go ahead. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that men can't do, which the women do. So, get out there and help your women to have more time to do this stuff.
I totally agree with it. But apart from the leisure time that we speak, like you said, the percentage of participation is quite low. What can we do to increase that percentage? Like there is
Make the chai.
Of course.
Yeah.
Like there is a Pinkathon organized by Milind Soman to introduce more women into the running scene.
Yeah.
What else can we do to introduce them to the cycling scene?
So very frankly, I think that, superficially one can start doing more. So in a way, Inspire India also tries to encourage more women to join in by giving rebates on the registration fees. So we try to encourage our male participants, the team members particularly, that, bring in women riders with you, and at least there'll be a discount on the registration. Plus, you're coming into an environment where, since I'm a woman conducting the races, this will be an environment which will be friendly for women to race in. But I also know that that's just a little encouragement. Really, what is going to work? I mean, setting up events which are for women only would be great also. I'm actually seriously considering doing that. But in ultra cycling, it's difficult to do that because there are such few women.
Right.
But yeah, we've had a few of our participants from Deccan Cliffhanger. One that I can name off the top of my head is Rahul Zanzurne, who has been cycling at Deccan Cliffhanger solo this was his third year.
Okay.
And this year he got his wife along with some friends to come as a participant in the team. And I
Wow.
don't think she had too much or any cycling background, but it was really good to see that. So, if all participants of the events would just bring their partners, or not necessarily their partners if they're not interested in it, don't force them to do it, but a woman friend or a
Right.
neighbor or the neighbor's daughter or anybody, just bring one more person into the sport, bring in the women around you into whatever sport you're doing.
Right.
If everybody who's running and cycling today did it, we would have immediately a balancing out of the numbers.
That's brilliant. I want you to put light on the routes that you choose. How do you choose them? And these are some of the really beautiful places
Yeah.
that people want to go on a road trip, and you are making people race on that.
Yeah. India is so fantastic for, like, we have such a diverse terrain, we have such diverse climate.
Yes.
And within 200 kilometers, you have a complete change of terrain, food, plantation, everything. And I've enjoyed traveling the length and breadth of this country for years now. So after I saw, like, PBP 2011 was a big eye-opener for me, because it's a great way to peer into another country.
Yes.
And then I saw Race Across America, and I was blown away by the whole scale of that thing, because you start from one coast, you're starting from one ocean, and it's
Yes.
at oceanside, the start point. And then you set your back to one entire ocean, and you go right across that continent to the next ocean. I mean, across to the other shore, and
Right.
that's another ocean there. So, you look at that kind of a race, and your perspective is that as though you're looking down on the earth. That's the sort of scale of operations that you're looking at. So over here, when I started to put up the races, the first one was the Deccan Cliffhanger.
Yes.
And since I'm based in Goa, I'm like, okay, 600 kilometers plus is the race that we want to do. How many people are going to be interested to come to Pune for the race? So, sort of, Pune to Goa, Deccan Cliffhanger was a little no-brainer in some ways, because
Yes.
it's like, okay, Goa sounds like a great place that people would really want to finish a race at. So let's do that. So, and of course, because we're in Pune and we're in the heart of the Sahyadris, we
Right.
use the Sahyadri ranges to make the race tougher. We climb up the hills to Mahabaleshwar and down. So once we sort of knew where the start and where I wanted to have the finish, then the idea was to include mountain ranges in it, to include to increase the difficulty level, obviously. The next race was Ultra Spice, and the Ultra Spice race, I don't, I think I was exposed to some parts of that route, and I just thought they were beautiful, those mountains with the plantations there. And again, of course, it is another challenging race. So
It is.
Yeah, it really is challenging. The amount of climbing there per kilometer is per 100 kilometers is higher than RAAM also. And at that point, I was thinking that we need to have a middle step between Deccan Cliffhanger, which is 640 kilometers, and RAAM, which is 5,000. We needed the middle tappa, so to speak, or the middle step. So I was looking at a 1750 to 2,000 kilometer event. And, since we go to Goa already for Deccan Cliffhanger, I thought, okay, let's start this one here. And then I had some exposure to the roads in the Mangalore and the Coorg section. And I had not been to Uti for many years until I went to Recce for the Ultra Spice race. And then the route just fell together, because it explores all the mountain ranges in the south, and the route is just spectacular. So one of the interesting feedbacks that I get from racers is that though it's 1750, and 1750 is a rigorous distance by
is.
any way of looking at it, the thing is that the racers actually enjoy that route. So that's a huge motivation for them, because the route is so beautiful. It keeps you going. There are some patches of that race which are really lovely, and they come to you when you're 800 kilometers into the race, and you're going through the beautiful tea plantations, and
Right.
it's so. I think it works that I've actually created a 1750-kilometer race that people enjoy racing. And then the third one was the Himalayan, which I concocted literally at the snap of my fingers with one of our race officials, Grishma, who has a hostel in Leh. So we were just talking on one of our drives, and within 30 minutes, we had just thought up the race route. She told me, there's this road, the road surface is good for road bikes. We can start in Leh, we can finish here. We can, go and come back, and her hostel becomes our race headquarters.
Wow.
So literally in 30 minutes, we had charted out, at least done the groundwork and charted out the world's highest ultra race.
Wow. The world's highest ultra race. That sounds...
Yeah. And the
quite
idea,
surreal.
the idea of that race is to actually, I know that ultra racers around the world will, once they learn that there is a race in the Himalayas,
Yes.
it will be a huge attraction for them.
Right.
To come and to race like that in the Himalayas is amazing. So
People travel abroad to race, to participate in races like the Ironman race across Australia, to specifically to visit these places on road.
Yeah.
And people coming to India is it's quite fabulous,
So these races are designed also to expose fellow Indians also. So most of the people who've done Ultra Spice have never been on those roads before, and they come back year after year because they love it. And then of course the Ladakh and Leh is a magnificent race to go through. Really tough, because we had feedback today afternoon from Kabir, who is Inspire India's first ultra awardee, because he's completed all 3 races within 1 year, and all in podium positions actually. So he's tasted every race, and multiple times, of course. So the Himalayan, he and his crew said that you feel so vulnerable out there, and it is really tough compared to any of the other races, for the simple reason that the Himalayas just challenge you and challenge who you are as a person. It shakes the scale of those mountains just shakes who you are.
Even the oxygen limits the person as a racer.
It's a high altitude race. Yeah.
So what challenges do they face? And as a race director, what challenges do you face in creating such races every year? Like this year, what were your challenges?
The biggest challenge, I think, is to my pocket. To be very honest about it. These races, ultra racing around the world is an expensive sport for participants, because they have to have support crew, support vehicles. They have to make sure that there's accommodation, food, travel, all of that is arranged. I know that my participants spend a hell of a lot to take part in my races. At the same time, for me to run and operate these races is a very expensive production also. And it's okay. I'm just waiting for it at some point to sort of even out, at least, if nothing else. So, and of course, aside from that, the races are... the challenge for me as a race organizer is to ensure that everybody who's taking part remains safe in the race. So, we're racing out there day and night on the road. There's a car, and there are cars involved as well in this day and night activity. Sleep deprivation, for the first and the biggest thing that people need to recognize and deal with for my races is sleep deprivation, because everybody is going to be sleep deprived, and then your functionality obviously reduces. So understanding it, addressing sleep deprivation for the racer and the crew is one of the biggest things for racers and for me, to ensure that they are not so sleep deprived that they compromise on safety. That's the biggest challenge. Yeah.
So apart from that, when you speak about safety, Indian roads are known for being unsafe. I can say that safely.
Yeah. Safely say that they're not safe. Yeah.
So what do you think? What should be an individual's contribution to make sure that it's safe,
So,
especially for the
as
cyclists?
yeah, so as we are seeing more and more cyclists start taking to the roads,
Yes.
all across the country, and I'm talking about everything from the people who are just doing their 5-10 kilometers of cycling in the morning, to the ones who are commuting to work, to at the very end of this, pyramid, you'll have the ultra racers and the pro racers. Everybody's out there on the road. We are doing a very specific activity, but
Yes.
all the other users of the road are just going about their normal day-to-day stuff.
Right.
And we, of course, like I've said this before in some of my talks and seminars, that cycling raises your sense of awareness of your surroundings. Because to stay safe on a cycle, you have to become far more aware of what's going on.
Right.
And as our numbers grow, more people who are just normal people like everybody else, but are taking to this activity, are becoming aware of safety and traffic related problems in this country, issues in this country.
Right.
And in a very organic way, people across the country are addressing these issues in their own local way, whether it's, bad road conditions, whether it's bad driving conditions that they're facing, through signature campaigns, through actually addressing the corporation, getting the corporation to do things about it. And hopefully in time we'll be able to address these issues at a higher level and get traffic discipline in this country to improve.
Speaking about discipline and awareness, what do you think? How can media like ours be a part of the community to spread more awareness? How can we do it much better?
So I think that the main thing that one wants to see that would keep us all safe is
Yes.
for every single user of the road, not just the cyclist, but all the other users of the road, to become aware of how their acts, how their driving or their usage of the road impacts other people.
Right.
The more vulnerable. So the most vulnerable on the road are actually cyclists, more vulnerable than pedestrians or runners, because once you're on two wheels and you're on this thing, you're far more vulnerable to anything that, and you're moving, you're far more vulnerable than any of the other users. So, through media like this, through any media platforms, if we can reach out to people to start just thinking about this, that's all it takes actually. It just takes people to become aware that some action of theirs could impact somebody could impact somebody's life or their health in a serious kind of a way. That's what it takes to raise that thing. So discussions about this and just spreading this across the country would be great.
So what's next for Inspire India? Any new race
Oh my
which can
God.
come up?
Well, yeah. So the thing is that I know that my racers who are already doing these races on a regular basis are like, they're constantly looking to see, okay, is there going to be something more, something new? What next? I'm getting bored. So that was actually Kabir's. Kabir called me a week ago or something and said, so why don't you put up one more race? Because there was a race in the US that we were all watching, which is a part of this family of races, and that's called it's a 6, 12, 24 format. That is 6 hours, 12 hours and 24 hours. And it's on a loop in which you basically do the longest distance that you can in these time limits.
Okay.
So that race format, as yet, we haven't seen that in India.
Right.
So Kabir, of course, is watching this race taking place there and thinking, why don't we do that here? We meaning, why doesn't Inspire India and Divya put up this race? So I get a call saying, how about this? And I'm like, I'm thinking about it, but I'm not promising anything just yet. I've just, he's recovered from riding 1750 kilometers at Ultra Spice. I have not recovered from conducting Ultra Spice yet. So that might be the next plan. There's another request from Karthik Padmanabhan from Chennai, who said, 1750 was not enough. I'm like, are you serious? So
Maybe a golden cordlet.
Well, RAAM is 5,000, so why can't we, no, he's actually put in a idea about extending the Ultra Spice. Like, why do you stop at Ooty and turn back? Go the other side, do this, do that, climb a few more mountains and then go back to Goa. I'm like, okay, it's a little too early for me to think about it. Give me a few more months and then we'll talk again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe a K2K
So that's the kind of crazy people that we're dealing with out here,
People have surely bit the cycling virus, I can say.
Yeah. I have 2 other races which have been in the pipeline for 3-4 years.
Okay.
One is the Great Coast Race, which because India has, so again, I like to look at the geography of India and see what can we do with that. So the Great Coast Race basically goes along the peninsula of India.
Okay.
All along and we have huge coastline.
The east coast and the west coast.
The east and the west. So roughly the plan, and I have a route map out already. It would start from somewhere in Bombay, hug the coastline all the way down to Kanyakumari, and then go up the next coast till, Vizag or further. Up until we decide to end it. So that's a 3,000 plus race. Then there's another race which is from the K2K. K2K Ultra is in the pipeline. This year at Ultra Spice, we had tracking devices. Okay. So it made it much easier for us to be able to, because on these long races, one of the things that I have to constantly monitor is the locations of everybody.
Right.
The racers and my officials. And so more than 1750 kilometers would be impossible for me to monitor unless we have tracking.
Right.
So now that we have tracking devices in India, I am going to be thinking about setting up those races. The format might be different though, because they would become very expensive. So the number of people doing it would be far less. So I'm consider doing those as unsupported races with minimal kind of monitoring from my team.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
There's a lot of things in the pipeline.
That's
I don't know
brilliant.
when.
We just hope that it comes out very soon.
Yeah, I hope to see you at one of them.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I think I can start with Deccan Cliffhanger next year.
Sounds great.
That's brilliant. Thank you for coming on the show. I hope you had fun talking about your races.
It's always fun. Get me started. I'll be here for another couple of hours talking about them. Wow. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks for coming on the show. I hope to see you again. Until then, I shall bid you goodbye, and we shall have some more guests on the show who would like to speak about such topics. And stay tuned till then. Make sure you subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, JioSaavn. We are everywhere. So just make sure you subscribe. You search for Hit the Road. And yeah, that's it. Ciao.
Thank you, and hit the road, everybody.